All right, my name is Hien Luu, and I'm at the Unlock conference in Seattle. Beautiful ballpark here. And I have Manju joining me this afternoon for a casual chat. Welcome, Manju. Maybe you would like to do a short intro?
Of course. Yeah. No, thank you. Thank you for having me here. I'm Manju Rajashekhar. I am currently the co-founder and CEO of a company called Mad Labs. We are a young startup focused on building agents that are reliable, consistent, and have a governance structure around it. Prior to this, I was a VP of engineering at Etsy, where I led their search, ads, and personalization
Awesome.
division. Before that, I was a startup founder, a company called Blackbird. We did multimodal deep learning and search as a service. And I was early at Twitter. I ended up building a lot of their caching services around that time. And fail whale was a pretty common thing, and I actually helped fix the fail whale problem at that time.
Right. Wow. With your extensive experience, I feel we're going to have a fun conversation here with topics about AI, caching, latencies, and all that good stuff with that. Well, let's start with a fun topic. Like nowadays, coding agent is very popular. It's being used by many companies and software engineers.
Mhm.
I'm sure you have dabbled with it. Just want to get your thought on it and how you're using it.
Yeah, so I used to be a prolific developer, programmer a long time ago. Then I moved into management and leadership, and only recently ended up going back to building. And
Okay.
honestly, the coding agents have really made it coding more accessible to people like me.
Yes.
It's brought the fun of building things back, where I don't have to spend a lot of time typing code, but I can spend a
Yes.
lot of time thinking about what exactly I'm building, what's the problem that I'm solving, how do I go about solving it,
Yeah.
and have a coding agent do most of the work in terms of typing the code and building those pieces. So that's one important thing. The second is the speed at which you can go from an idea to bringing it back to life is just like it is it's just mind blowing. And
Yeah.
unless you play with it,
Yeah.
you wouldn't know what's possible. So I feel like a kid again, back having access to toys that I never did as a as a young developer, but now I do, and it's just great.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. I also dabble with that, and also I was been a manager, so it's been fun of going back to coding and experimenting and leveraging this tool to uh, try out different ideas and such.
Yeah, and now you can be a polyglot programmer.
Yes.
Like typically earlier, like you'd be really good at one or a couple of languages. Either you're a backend engineer or a machine learning engineer
Yeah.
or front end. Now all parts of the stack is accessible.
Totally.
It's almost like you now feel like you have these like godlike superpowers, which I think there are like pros and cons to that kind of thinking. But
Yeah.
it's like pretty great like in terms of what we have access to now.
Very true. I also use it for like writing as well. Surprisingly, it's done quite well. But let's move on. Another interesting topic is AI agents, right? But let's focus more in the context of this conference. It's about caching, low latency. In your experience, like, building AI agents or using use cases where like caching and low latency makes a big difference in terms of the agent's capabilities and user experience?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that people don't realize is that when you use these large language models, they're primarily gated by their ability to generate tokens. So if you can figure out a way for where they're consuming fewer tokens, or they don't have to produce that many tokens, you end up having a faster response time. But
Yep.
it's not just the low latency like seems like it's fast, but low latency really ends up mapping to cost, because low latency is directly proportional to the number of tokens being generated. And all of these models are pricing based on number of input tokens and number of output tokens.
Yes.
So while you might, with some of the models, you might have a subsidized kind of engagement today, you know that it is at some point in the future, they're going to go back to the price that you have to pay for each of those tokens. So low latency actually really matters for being able to use these large language models effectively, not just for the response time, but also for the price that you're
Cost.
paying to get that experience.
Gotcha, because like the cost will blow up, right? As your users start using it more and the number of turns keep increasing. Any
Absolutely.
thoughts about like where caching might come in and helpful with these kind of applications?
Yeah, so one part of the caching is obviously there's people who are who work with these models. They know to not blow up their to do it in a way that they can use the KV cache, and so they end up being very thoughtful about how they end up building their programs.
Mm-hmm.
But the other piece is also around where is how you engineer the context to the agents. So no, the typical no, these LLMs are like unlike any other building blocks that we have seen in the past. Typically with machine learning, the more data do you give, you get better performance.
Yes. Yeah.
But with LLMs, like the more context you give,
Yes.
the less smarter they become. And so the performance of these models is like directly proportional to the context that you give them
The
and
right context.
exactly the right context is the relevance of the context to the task at hand.
That's exactly.
And that needs to have high signal to noise ratio.
Yep.
What that ends up becoming is that the agents that are much narrower in their domain
Mm-hmm.
end up doing a lot better because their context has a very clear goal, and their context doesn't also blow up the context window of these models.
That's
And the
right.
models have less attention. They don't have to keep up too much attention, and they
Right.
end up doing really good work
Yeah.
at a price point that makes a lot of sense, at a latency profile that is responsive.
And talking about costs and latency, right? One of the areas that really exciting is about the open source language models.
Mm-hmm.
And recent time, there's been a lot of innovations. Most recent one, DeepSeek V4 and GOMs and all that.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of interesting innovation comes out of that and how software engineers leverage them. What has your experience like with these open source models, small ones?
So it's I have been playing a lot with the open source model, and one of the reasons I got these models where it's a lot easier to just run them locally.
Yeah.
And so you can run them in a quantized versions of these models, so they can
Yes.
really run them on your laptop as long as you have access to a couple of GPUs.
Mm-hmm.
And it really forces you to think really hard. And what I mean by that is I think when you have access to these really amazing foundational models like Opus or Sonnet or the ones coming out from Google and OpenAI, they actually get most things right. But behind the scenes, you don't know the kind of thinking that is going on,
That's
like
right.
how much tokens they're processing.
Yeah.
So the moment you get these like open source models that don't have the same level of performance profile as these foundational models, you are forced to think in constraints, which allows you to like build the scaffolding around these agents
Yes.
really, really well. So a different way to think about it is that the constraints ends up forcing innovation in a very different way. And the constraints here, as you're working with these models and you get to see the behind the scenes of it, and you also get to see exactly what context, what kind of capability in terms of tool calls you need to provide them in order to execute the task that you're trying to execute.
Yeah, and I think like software engineer, they love to have the ability to control as well as understanding what's happening as well.
Exactly. It's like the constraints force innovation is just a
Yeah.
different way to think about the same idea.
Cool. Awesome. Well, it's been a fun chat. Appreciate you stopping by.
Of course. And thanks for having me.
All right.